Hey guys, what's up, it's iFlynn here, and today I'm going to tell you why I think Warframe tier lists are a little bit silly and then contradict myself by showing you guys a tier list of my own. The main problem with Warframe tier lists is that they try to measure how strong a frame is relative to every other frame, which is quite tricky when accounting for personal biases, playstyles, the content that they're being run in, and so on. Tier lists often make qualifications such as this is ranked for base steel path, or this assumes that you don't have access to the helm system, and all sorts of stuff like that. What I'd like to propose is to consider how much value frames actually add to your account, or in other words, to see what options crafting a specific Warframe would open up to you. Building what we would call a fat account has never been more important thanks to game modes such as the circuit, EDA, ETA, and all the different mission types that DE may introduce with every update. So frames that allow you to run specific activities more efficiently are placed higher in this tier list than frames that don't offer anything especially unique, since you have good reasons to get a full build going for them earlier than you would for others while prepping your account for Warframe's endgame. For example, Korra, Atlas, and Gara are all exalted melee frames. However, Korra offers something that the others don't: fantastic additional looting opportunities. Atlas might have Orgaze, but this is just way less practical than Pilfering Strangledome, so Korra is more valuable to your account than Atlas. A frame like Gara might have a higher kills per minute potential than Korra, though that is debatable, but doesn't have a niche like the one that Korra occupies. This means that even if Atlas or Gara are more fun to play and or are better from a KPM perspective, they're not necessarily better for your account than Korra. The reason that I've structured the tier list this way rather than the traditional S, A, B, C, etc. style is to try to give players an idea of how they should think about building out their account for the first time. Remember that fun and preference still do matter, and if you, as I do, hate playing Korra, there's nothing wrong with going for a less optimal alternative like Hydroid or Necros just because you dislike a frame. Almost every Warframe at this point is ludicrously strong, so you're not throwing by picking a different frame that's in the same niche. Still, this is a game that involves a lot of grinding, and sometimes sacrificing a measure of fun for greater efficiency allows you to save time so you can have fun in the game in game modes that you actually enjoy. I'm not trying to tell you to not get a frame because they're not efficient. I'm just trying to give you a rough idea of what certain frames can offer you that others can't in the meta that we find ourselves in 2025. First up, we have our must-haves, or the S tier if this was a traditional tier list. These are the 4 frames that every single Warframe player should try to acquire as soon as possible. Volt is the most versatile frame in the game. He's either best in slot or near best in slot in virtually every game mode that this game offers. He's the go-to frame for Aya farming, Eidolons, fast profit taker, and melee buffing. He's a great choice for quick exterminates, captures, a potential sub for Chroma in arbitrations, works well in ESO focus farming, offers really strong team buffs with Shock Trooper and speed, is one of the 2 frames, Kome being the other, who can buff amp damage through his shield. He can even catch every fish on the plains of Eidolons in one throw without needing to use the right spear. What more could you possibly want? Nova is fantastic in every mode that Volt isn't near best in slot for, so covers pretty much everything that Volt doesn't. She's the best frame to have to trivialize interceptions by slowing enemies down, and to increase your efficiency in nodes like defense, Netracels, and survivals by speeding the enemies up. She's also Volt's best partner in Eidolon hunting and Aya farming, thanks to her portals. Mirage. Now this one is a little bit of a toss-up, and the only reason why I place Mirage above Saren is that she's the best focus farmer in Elite Sanctuary Onslaught, and the second fastest profit taker killer behind Volt. Saren is the second best focus farmer and the 3rd best profit taker killer, so this is really a game of millimeters. Other than that, both Saren and Mirage fill pretty similar roles. Both are essential to run meta arbitrations, both clear quick steel path exterminates with energized munitions like nobody's business, both make terrible guns feel decent and great guns feel borderline obscene. They're both extremely strong. Next up we have Korra, and I hate this frame. She is extremely boring and a great way to speedrun your way to arthritis. However, there's no denying just how good she is. She is the best loot frame in survivals. She's required and fills one of the two most important roles in Voidunoi endo farming, and her Whip Claw is one of the strongest pseudo-exalted weapons in the game and can more than make up for having less than perfect weapons in modes like EDA and ETA. Now we're moving on to the excellent tiers. Basically, any frame that is in one of the next 3 tiers is outstanding and is great to build and have in your account. The only thing that separates them is if they either fill a specific niche that other frames don't, or if they come with caveats. These tiers aren't ordered because the value of a specific niche depends on the player's preference, and I've grouped similar frames in the lower 2 tiers because it makes things easier to understand. So, excellent with a strong niche. These are frames that are generally very good choices for all the missions, but have something in particular that they do that other frames just aren't as good at. They're not as centralizing as those in the must-have tier, but they definitely add a lot of value to your account. Chroma. This one hurts. Chroma should be in a very, very low tier because most of his abilities are quite useless, but he has 2 super important use cases that his value to your account simply can't be ignored. Techrot safe credit farming is an extremely fast and easy method of requiring a lot of credits and basically requires 0 investment. A well-invested Chroma can also clear Profit Taker at an extremely competitive speed, only being outclassed by the likes of Saren, Mirage, and Vault, and has the benefit of actually doubling the credits that you receive, which is the main reason for doing that farm in the first place. I hate that he's up so high, and I do think that he's in desperate need for a rework to make him anything other than just a credit bot.
What is my purpose?
You farm credits.
Oh my god.
But because of how important credits are in this game, I can't really put him any lower. Next up we have Saren, and the only reason that Saren isn't in the must-have tier is because Mirage is up there. You could swap their positions and no one would really bother disagreeing, hopefully. Get one of the 2 and you're going to be sorted. Get both and you're golden. Titania is the best frame in the game for captures and low-level fissures with Thermal Sunder equipped via the Helminth, and also the most efficient frame to kill Archons with. Her pistols actually scale incredibly well into endurance when running Zada's Whisper and secondary Enervate, although she does become a lot more single target oriented. Zaku's level scaling damage means they're good in pretty much every mission. They shine mainly in endurance, where enemy damage starts to outscale health. Still, the reason they're in this tier is that they're the best crate buster in the game, which is perfect for those who hate survival and would rather farm the resources in captures. Next up we have Necros, not as effective as Korra at killing, but incredibly useful just because of Desecrate, a loot chance booster separate from the pilfering loot abilities that Korra, Atlas, and Hydroid have. Necros can also subsume on Petrify with the Orgaze Augment to be the best solo loot generator in the game, and Desecrate is also a great support ability beyond just the resource generation because it can create an enormous amount of health and energy orbs. Terrify is also one of the easiest to manage armor stripping abilities in the game, and with Creeping Terrify, it has excellent CC. Wukong's generally a strong Warframe with a decent Exalted, 2 ways to go invincible in Cloudwalker and Defy, but the main reason he's in this tier is that he's the best Spy Warframe. Put the Perspicacity Helminth ability over his 1 and you'll never have to worry about spy missions ever again. Sevagoth is the best scaling nuke frame in the game because his Reap and Sow combination deal health % damage. Stick Roar over his Shadow and you've got a frame that's mowing down enemies all the way to level cap while never needing to look at a weapon. Mace has got a set of strong Exalted Pistols and is a decent pick in most missions. The main reason she's here is because Deimos is one of the most annoying standing grinds in the game, and Mesa is the best frame to clear the brute force bounty with to earn mother tokens efficiently. Rhino is the ultimate comfort pick thanks to Iron Skin, and since a full strength Roar is far more valuable than a full strength Nourish, he's the best brain off shotgun Warframe in the game. Caliban is the best team-wide shield battery thanks to his summons. He applies vulnerability to both status chance and status damage, which are multipliers that are pretty hard to come by, as well as offering defense strip to clear enemy shields and armor. Caliban can easily carry teams through EDA and ETA thanks to what he can do. Next up we have Dante, and Dante is basically Caliban but for Overguard. Dante offers teammates priming and vulnerability, which are slightly weaker than Caliban's debuffs, but Dante more than makes up for that because of how good Overguard and his 3-3-4 nuke combo are. Kome is in this tier because she is the perfect beginner Warframe. You can stick an Orc and Catalyst and as many Forma on her as you like and not have to worry about it because she doesn't have a prime variant yet. She teaches you how to play the game by making her decrees contingent on performing actions that you don't often see from newer players, and they can really help out with making the early game guns and melees feel a lot better. Her build literally requires just 175 range, then whenever you want. And that's really easy to achieve from the get-go. She's perfect for where she's placed in the game. Loki has the two best methods of survivability in the game, invulnerability and invisibility. He can also switch teleport with NPC defense targets to make them invulnerable, which is something that no other frame can do. Octavia's got absurd team-wide buffs like invisibility, movement speed, multi-shot, base damage, melee attack speed, and also has high level scaling damage with her mallet ability. She can be annoying to play because of the occasional need to teabag, but so long as you're playing actively and bullet jumping around, your invisibility will basically never go down. She's also the best frame to farm standing in Fortuna and the planes through because of conservation, as her invisibility lasts for a very long time. She's got a free subsume slot for silence or rest and rage depending on your preference, and gets speed buffs from her third ability. Side09 is the best solo Warframe in the game. He should be in the excellent with caveats with Baruch, Haro, and the others because theoretically, he does have to compete with his teammates to keep his abilities up, but the difference here is between him and the others is that if there's a sight on the team, no one else is getting any kills. He literally has wall hacks and a gun buff that is better than both Toxic Lash and Zada's Whisper because you can choose any damage type in the game. Wisp has fire rate, she has speed, usually a really strong roar buff, crowd control and damage through breach surge, incredible survivability thanks to her passive and her Will of the Wisp ability. These are all things that would put her in the tier below. However, the reason she's in this tier is because she's the fourth member of the meta arbitration team. Next up, we have the excellent tier. These are frames that you can't go wrong with. They don't have any specific niche, but you're never going to be scared about going into a ETA or EDA with any of them. To save everyone's time, I'm just going to go ahead and group all the frames according to the role that they play and explain why they're excellent. Veruna, Gauss, Ureli, Mag, Araxia, Hydroid, Kullervo, Degaf. All of these frames are some variant of gun or melee buffer, but none of them are as versatile as, let's say, Vault, Mirage, and Saren. Ash, Atlas, Valkyr, Excalibur, Temple, Garuda, and Gara. All frames with an excellent exalted or pseudo exalted, which means you can often get by with subpar weapons in most game modes. Garuda would come with a caveat because you can't actually use her claws in ETA and EDA, but her access to executes and an absolutely absurd nuke with her 1 as well as an infinite energy pool means she deserves to stay up in excellent, as she can make up for that caveat in other ways. You gotta remember that her passive is a 100% damage buff that's multiplicative to all damage sources. You can't go wrong with that. Zephyr, Frost, Styanax, Protea, Citrine, Jade, and Nezha. All of these frames are just simply really good, with some like Protea and Nezha leaning towards the more offensive side, and others like Frost and Citrine leaning more towards that defensive side. Regardless, a theme with all of them is providing the team with energy or survivability, crowd controlling enemies, and providing extremely competitive damage. Vauban could be in the tier above because he's quite possibly the single best level cap frame. He has a passive that's multiplicative to all damage, 2 sources of level scaling damage in Tesla Nervos and Flechette Orbs, gun buffs, grouping, armor strip, the whole package basically. However, since Vauban's kit is absurdly complex and level cap isn't an activity that most of the community actively participate in, he's got to stay in excellent. Revenant could be in the Outclassed tier for a number of reasons, but he could also be in the must-have tier depending on the type of player that you are. Infral is the worst chaos, Reeve is the worst level scaling damage option in the game, Mesmer skin is obviously good, but any Loki player player paying any attention has better survivability, as well as the option to benefit from the stealth multiplier to melee. And Revenant's 4 is useless, which means that using Roar is borderline mandatory on him to deal even halfway decent damage compared to a lot of the other frames on this list. However, Mesmer Shield keeps him in the excellent tier for me, as well as not as good as Switch Teleport because it can only affect teammates, not all allies. It does offer teammates an additional layer of comfort that can be quite nice to have in Endurance, where they keep them alive in EDA or ETA. Since Revenant, unlike Caliban, Dante, Loki, and so on, doesn't have a niche that he excels in, he's staying here in Excellent, as much as certain members of my community would love to put him in Outclassed and others in Must-Have. Now we're moving into the Excellent with Caveats tier. This is probably the most controversial tier, so I'd like to make something really clear right out the gate. None of these frames are bad. However, there are certain conditions which make these frames perform less than optimally, either in group or solo play, which warrants putting them in this tier rather than the tier above. We're going to group a few that should be obvious, but I'll explain why the rest are in the position that they're in. Geyer, Harrow, Baruch, Grendel. All of these frames are competing with their teammates for kills, and unlike Sight, they don't have enough in their kit to guarantee that they top frag every single time. Banshee. I'm honestly quite torn with this one because I don't know whether to place Banshee in Excellent with Strong Niche or here in Excellent with Caveats. Banshee's niche is that she's the fastest way to level terrible weapons through Savage Silence, and that she's the best Lich Hunter in the game. The problem is that leveling terrible weapons isn't that difficult because of Elite Sanctuary Onslaught, and killing Liches isn't difficult anymore either because of the amount of powerful weapons that we now have access to. Banshee's caveat is that she's incredibly squishy, and unlike a frame like Mirage, doesn't have a dump stat because of how ridiculously strong Silence, Sonic Boom with Sonic Fracture, and Sonar are. However, the main problem with Banshee is that she lacks a reliable shield gate ability in her base kit because of Sonic Boom's 0.8 second cooldown between casts. Sonar's also got a long two-handed casting animation, and Silence has the inability to be recast while active. This basically locks Banshee into running a survivability helmet over her fourth ability. Evade would seem like a good option, but it's only going to proc on headshot kills, something that Banshee is actively disincentivized from doing because of how Sonar works, and it isn't as reliable on her as it is on Sight in group play because she lacks wall hacks. Gloom works to some extent and can be really potent in combination with Silence, but it doesn't provide a reliable shield gate. My personal favorite option for grip play is Condemn, which allows you to easily hit Sonar spots and regain your shields, but it does mean that you have to adopt a very active playstyle. Hildryn is one of the best frames below level 1000 thanks to Aegis Gale, but absolutely falls apart against Infested and Murmur enemies because she has nothing to pillage to upkeep her energy, shield economy. Corvex is actually a pretty strong frame. The only problem is he really struggles against enemies with Overguard since they can't be affected by radiation procs. At extremely high levels or in EDA or ETA with the modifiers that gives all enemies Overguard, this makes him a little bit of a liability. Lavos. His lack of energy means you're essentially locked into shield or health tanking with him, which doesn't feel great because you lose a lot of control over your survivability. Subsuming any ability off substantially reduces the power of Valence Formation, which is extremely unfortunate as that's the main reason that you would want to play him. He also struggles in grips where he can't reduce his cooldowns with Swift Bite or Transmutation Probe as consistently. Nyx. Now this one is going to be a little bit controversial, but I'm going to go ahead and say that Invulnerability isn't worth moving as slowly as you do when you're using Nyx with Assimilate. You can put all of the parkour shards that you want onto her to make her roll further, but ultimately you're not going to be able to perform basic maneuvers like bullet jumping, and that's just awful. It puts her in a terrible situation because when weighing the options between controlling one enemy's mind and complete and total invulnerability, the second one seems like a no-brainer. However, as a result, most Nyx players don't mod themselves for any survivability at all, which means they can be really slow in missions as they can't drop their Assimilate without risking death. My honest thoughts on Nyx are that if Assimilate wasn't an option and people just used her as like a hybrid support and DPS frame, thanks to like Chaos and the crit buffs that you can get, and then you would subsume over her 4 with the likes of Roar, she might be a tier above. But the thing is, why would you do that when game modes like ETA and EDA exists and invulnerability just seems too good to pass up on? She's a strong Warframe, it's just the preferred playstyle is very, very slow, very, very clunky. It's effective, but it just slows you down. Trinity is honestly really strong, but she has 2 big problems. The first of which is that you have to basically run 3 augments on her, which greatly limits the amount of mods that you could slot on. That alone wouldn't be enough to put a caveat on her, but to get the full value out of her kit, you also need to run a Bleeding Dragon key, which is just a pain in the ass because you need to remember to put it on and take it off. Next, we're moving into the Outclassed, but with a strong niche category. This is a very odd tier, which Chroma would have been in had he not doubled a resource as important as credits. These are basically frames for which better alternatives exist, but they have one specific thing that they do that actually gives them a little bit of a count value. Nidus has all of the problems of the frames who hate playing in teams, but unlike them, he can be an active detriment to the team in an endurance mission. If Nidus can't build a sufficient amount of stacks to mutation gate once enemy damage gets high enough to one-shot him, well, all that's going to happen is he's going to keep on dying. The other frames who prefer being solo just sort of don't do anything, but aren't really liabilities. However, Nidus is required for the Voidunoi Endo farm because of having a full reach larva, which is why he's got a strong niche. A good limbo can be outstanding in solo play and useful in group play, especially in the likes of Excavation, but unlike Baruch, Sight, etc., a bad limbo can actually ruin an entire squad's experience. Still, Limbo is a good crate busting alternative to Saku, and in the right hands is actually really good. The problem with Limbo is that putting the time in to learn the intricacies of his kit is kind of not worth the time investment, as he isn't really that strong. Now we're moving on to the Outclassed category. These are frames that basically have little to no place in Warframe's meta at the moment because other frames do what they do, just better. Even though the heirloom skin is great, the first frame that we're going to be talking about in this category is Ember. Temple is better in pretty much every way, and Ember actively hinders her own gameplay by force proccing heat stacks with no modded damage percentage onto virtually every enemy around her, ironically making her one of the worst frames to use with guns modded for heat damage. The one niche that she did have in heat inherit builds through Fireball Frenzy has also been power crept by Temple by being able to give every member of their team a 750% heat damage buff while they're in affinity range of them. Next, we're talking about Equinox. Dante is a better day form Equinox, Jade is a better night form Equinox, and both Dante and Jade don't need to mod their kits to consider how to best mod for both options. If day and night form could be modded separately like Sevagoth and his Shadow, Equinox would be absolutely incredible, implying energy transfer became a part of the base kit. Ivara, she's just absurdly slow, and unlike Nyx, she doesn't really have any redeeming qualities to make up for her lack of speed. None of her abilities are particularly special, she can't keep up with her teammates, and for a frame touted as a spy warframe, she's absolutely terrible at spy when you compare the Wukong or even Titania, since spy missions generally require a fair amount of mobility, which she just doesn't have thanks to Prowl. Her only purpose is completing a solo 5-minute survival without killing anyone Riven challenge because of her ability to pickpocket the life support. Inaros. There isn't anything that Inaros does that Hydroid doesn't do better. Hydroid can give himself an absurd amount of armor through plunder and also make himself an absurdly strong health tank, but with the additional benefit of also having shields. Hydroid doesn't need corrosive shards to full strip enemies armor. Hydroid can grip just as well as Inaros can. Hydroid can get enemies to drop additional loot while Inaros can't. Hydroid can buff his weapons with an absurd amount of corrosive damage, which Inaros can't do. Hydroid can make use of last gasp from the Yunari focus tree. Hydroid can spread viral everywhere through Viral Tempest, and Inaros can't do that. Point is, if you want a frame that's impossible to die on before level 1000, there are a lot of better options than Inaros. Oberon is currently strictly outclassed by Trinity and Jade, but he's getting a rework soon, and we all know that Pablo likes a good cook, so watch this space. Anyway, that's my tier list. I want to reiterate that my rankings are based on how fat certain Warframes can make your account, not their objective strength. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on whether this style of tier list is more helpful than the more traditional ones, which try to measure frames on their subjective strength rather than the account value that they offer. Remember that Warframe is still about fun. I just wanted to point out why I think you should consider getting and building some of the frames earlier than others along your journey. Doing this can make your overall experience with the game a lot more enjoyable in the long run, since you can access the content you want to access faster. As always, if you liked the video, hit like. If you want to see more Warframe content from me, hit subscribe. And if you have any questions or suggestions, drop a comment, hop into my Twitch streams, or join our community on Discord. I'll see you guys in the next one.